Hello, everyone, and welcome to the User Hour Fire Chat leading up to our conference in Salzburg. We have Heather Turner and Abhishek Ulayil today. Thank you for joining us. I will ask you to introduce yourselves before we start with the questions from the community.
Should I go first then?
Yeah. Please do, Heather.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Heather Turner. I'm currently working as a research software engineer at the University of Warwick. I've been a member of the R community a long time, and I've been to many user conferences. And I'm partly here today talking as a member of the R Foundation and chair of Forwards, the R Foundation task force for members of underrepresented groups.
Thank you, Heather. Abhishek?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Abhishek Ulayil. So for the past 2 years, I've been contributing to the R project, especially the R journal, and I've developed 2 grant packages around it. And it was a part of Google Summer of Code, and I'm continuing to mentor this year. So educationally, I've been pursuing actuarial science in Institute of Actuaries of India. So that should be a good description about me.
Excellent. And I'm Audrey Yeo. I'm a statistician and a statistical software engineer, and I'll be your host today. We have questions from the community, and I just want to shout out thank you to our community who have submitted these questions, and we will go through all of them. The first question is, what measures are in place to ensure the sustainability and long-term impact of diversity initiatives within the R Foundation?
Yeah, so I guess this is mainly a question for me. So I've been working in this area for some time. I think, to be honest, the short answer is we don't really have measures in place to ensure this stays sustainable and has long-term impact. So that is a concern. On the plus side, Forwards has become an established working group of the R Foundation. So it's been going about 8.5 years. It does have board support across the R Foundation. On the more negative side, the R Foundation members that are part of the task force are doing it as a side project. They sort of have limited capacity to contribute, and this means that we're quite heavily reliant on external contributors, and it's quite difficult to maintain an active group of contributors. Some of our work has been supported by different pots of funding, some coming from the R Foundation, the R Consortium, other small grants like Google Summer of Code, but some of these efforts still require some component of voluntary work. At the moment, I'm on a research fellowship. So personally, I do have some funding and support at the moment to work on diversity initiatives, and that's also supporting my colleague Ella Kay part-time, and we're working on initiatives to foster a more inclusive R contributor community, and Ella has been working on relaunching the Rainbow R community. So at the moment, those initiatives have support, but we are on a fixed term grant. So we are concerned about the longer term. So it's sort of difficult to think, what measures we could put in place. Obviously, we can look for further grant funding or seek donations to the R Foundation to help support this kind of work. And I'm personally also interested in exploring ways that we might be able to improve the governance and structure of the R Foundation, so that we have a sort of more of a process for sort of more regular turnover of people to lead these initiatives, and so that it's not so dependent on particular individuals. and so that, to see how we might make it more sustainable long term.
Thank you. Sounds like a lot of work over the last years. And Abhishek, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think our foundation is, trying out its best to include all people and, try to bring over talent. And I think many of the programs like Google Summer of Code, bring in students and attract a lot of talent to the community. And but after a while, like they need a kind of like a funding to continue their projects. And I think in this regard, if they get a better funding situation, then I assume that more people will continue working with the community and sustainably.
Thank you. Are there specific tools or technologies you would recommend for making the web content more accessible, particularly for technical subjects? Like, what have you seen in your experience?
I think the question is targeted towards me, so I'll take up this one. So over the years, I think people have waken up to the fact that web needs to be more accessible to people who have different kinds of different abilities. And in that regards, I think there has been you know acts which have been passed, like WCAG. So they are working on making accessibility guidelines common throughout the websites which run through different countries. And they are trying to implement it on a government level. So some countries have a you know regulation where you need to have to meet the specific guidelines regarding accessibility. And if you're a contributor in general who's like writing articles for R Markdown, in R Markdown for our journal or any other specific statistical software, then you will obviously have a lot of choices. Like you could have better alt text in the images, because these these are not just captions, these are a much better description of the image itself. Although the captions tell a good chunk of it, but we need a better alt text which will describe the image in a way, like as we all say that an image speaks 1,000 words. So we need to have some text which will describe the image in a way that many people can understand who do not have the ability. Also, I had this discussion, like many people using comments, that is they use the raw HTML comments in R Markdown, and it ends up in the articles, that is the HTML documents at the end. So if you can refrain using this, because the screen readers can actually read those embedded HTML tags, and so you don't want others to read your comments. So I think you can use alternatives such as using R comments in R code chunks, and then do not include it, that is include is false. So I think that is a good alternative for that.
And I notice alt text. This is a follow-up question from this. I'm curious about whether you can guide us on how to write alt text.
I think that should answer this.
Okay, so I was just going to chip in because there are some members of Forwards that have worked on this. So Liz Hare gave a nice talk to the Our Ladies group, I think it was in NYC, and so she's given some good guidance on how to write good alt text. And sort of going back to the more general structure of documents, Jonathan Godfrey wrote a guide on accessible sort of good practices for writing accessible R Markdown. It's a little bit old now because, as Abhishek mentioned, these days in both Markdown and Quarto, you have the option to use the Fig Alt option, so that you can easily add alt text to your code chunks that produce an image. But there's some basic principles, like, for example, not using a table to lay out, just for visual effects, but only using tables when you actually want to have tabular content, and basic principles like that.
What is the name of the I will attach this name to this YouTube description. What is the name of the presenter or the author?
So the first one I mentioned was Liz Hare,
Liz
and then with the guide to alt text, and Jonathan Godfrey, the general guide for accessible documents. Yeah, I can add those links.
Very much. Thank you both. Okay, next question we have. Having the R journal as a HTML is great. For package docs, usually I use tools like rdrr.io to browse HTML docs if they don't have package down. Will CRAN ever host HTML docs?
Yeah, so neither of us are on the CRAN team, so certainly can't make any promises, and they haven't made any official announcements of a decision to do this. But I know it has been discussed. It was discussed, I think on the RDevel mailing list a couple of years ago, and I think there has been some thought put into it behind the scenes. I think the idea then was that it isn't likely that there'll be sort of complex web pages. I think so I think the person that asked the question mentioned package down, which creates a sort of a sort of multi-page website for a package. So I think if anything happens on CRAN, it's more likely to be just a simple sort of one-page document and an HTML equivalent, more or less, to the PDF manuals that are already there. Yeah, so as I say, sort of no promises or timeline, but I think there is potential that could happen sometime.
Great. Anything else to add there before I move on?
I think I might add something to this. So as we head into the future, and future packages are built with modern guidelines which are dictated by CRAN, and I think there are some cookbooks in development. So I think they will definitely highlight the point that it should have a package downside. So the documentation and the function parameters and descriptions are easily available and accessible. So hopefully in future it will be a much simpler and easier way to discover this. And until then we have RDRR, so that should do it.
Thank you. What is the biggest gap you see today in terms of being an inclusive community?
Do you want to go first on this one, Abhishek?
So I think every community is built upon like the foundation that there are a subset of users who use R, and out of these subset there are members who contribute to the community aspect of it. That is like they will ask the maintainers if they have problems, such as those people who are working with fancy architectures like RISC-V or ARM based CPUs. I think it was back in 2020 when Apple launched M1, so many people were rushing to compile R onto Mac M1 so that they can get the difference in performance. So these kinds of people, they keep coming up, and they obviously enhance the diversity of R in the perspective that there are people who are trying out different things and tinkering with the software. And also the fact that there are many people who are passive contributors or passive community members who will read a lot. They will read through the blog posts, they will read through the chats, they will read through the discussions, but they will only interact when it's essential for them, or when they are asked upon, or it's something related to their package of work. So that is my perspective on the gap that we are trying to include, and I think Heather can add more to that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit vague in a sense in terms of which bit of the R world we're talking about. So if we think about the R project in terms of the sort of core project, and I think there is still a gap to be bridged between the R core team and the wider community. There's only a few members of our core that again have the capacity to engage on channels like the RDBL mailing list and R's Bugzilla, which is the bug tracker for R. And the end result of this can be that people will try and contribute or post something, and maybe they don't get a response, or maybe the response, the interactions can get a bit adversarial, or they can get a bit of a terse response that can be a bit off-putting. All the same, that this is something that everybody recognises, I think, and people are doing things to address. So that it's about 5 years ago, Tomasz Kalibir and Luke Tierney wrote a blog post, or they wrote a series of blog posts, but the one I'm thinking of is about how external contributors can help with bug triage. So obviously this has the advantage that if people post something, they get a response from somebody. It might not be a member of our core, and then it relieves some of the pressure of our core, so that hopefully there's sort of improvement all round. So there was some people that responded to that call, and that did help. But I think there's more that could be done. There's definitely more potential there. And then it's a sort of general area that we're trying to address as part of the R contribution working group, that again involves members of our core as part of that group. And one thing we're particularly focusing at the moment is trying to facilitate more in-person meetings. So we had the R Project Sprint in September last year, and we're organising a number of R Dev Days this year, including one as a satellite to the Use R conference. And I think these help, because people tend to work much better in person. There's a sort of agreed agenda of things that are helpful to work on. And so that can be a much more positive experience for both sides. So that's the R project. And if we're thinking about the R community more widely, then I guess the biggest gap is really between the global north and the rest of the world. So if we look at groups like our core, CRAN, our foundation, our consortium, and so on, the sorts of main organisations in the R community, a lot of those are predominantly people that are in Europe, US, Australia, New Zealand. So if you're outside those areas, there's a bit of a lack of representation, with some exceptions, but as a general rule. And I think maybe it's not so easy to get access to local groups and events and conferences and so on. So that again can lead to sort of isolation and exclusion. So it is again something that our foundation and has tried to address in some ways, but it's a big challenge, and so I think it's something that we need to continue working on.
Thank you. Thanks for being so transparent about.
I would like to add something to that. So regarding the R user groups, like for example in India, so what I've noticed is that there is a parity in number of students who are seeking to learn from these events. And if you consider the experts or people who have mastered the art of making R packages or maintaining them, and if you see the ratio of maintainers to the students, I think there are a lot more students rather than experts in this field. So what happens is, like, due to this difference in demographics, if for example those few people who are putting the group together, if they leave or if they have certain changes in their life, so they will leave, and then the whole R user group then becomes unstable in the way that the events are not being hosted properly, and after a while they abandon it. So I think this kind of balance is maintained more in European and other countries in the global north and Australia as well. So I think that is one of the reasons like why these user groups do not succeed in the longer term.
Yeah, thank you for adding to that point too. The next question we have from the community is, there are pockets of the community where people can be unfriendly to newcomers like CRAN. What do you recommend for people who want to get involved but have less experience? I think you kind of touched on some of these points before.
Yeah, so some of the things I was saying about the R project, can also apply to CRAN, and then it's one of those things that sometimes everything is fine, but other times people can have frustrating experience. So one thing that's happened recently is I'm on the steering committee for a project that's just been funded by the R consortium, and that has support from the CRAN team. And the idea here is to develop a CRAN cookbook, where the idea is that it's a sort of problem solution style documentation. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, the sort of formal documentation for writing our packages is writing our extensions, which is, a long and comprehensive document. So that's the official reference. But still there will be sort of common issues that come up when people submit their packages to CRAN, and this can lead to rejection, and nobody likes to be rejected. So the idea of this cookbook is to sort of have problem solution style documentation that both package maintainers can refer to before they submit, and that the CRAN team could point to when a common issue comes up, so they don't have to keep explaining the same thing. So we hope that goes some way to relieving some of the pain points. It's not going to fix everything, but hopefully it's a step in the right direction. Yeah, so it was a sort of two-part question in a way, wasn't it? Because there was the point about CRAN, and then what we would recommend for people. So I mean, thankfully there are a lot of different R communities that are supportive, and particularly designed for people that are new to the community and learning at different stages. So one that people might have heard of is R for Data Science, which has now become the Data Science Learning Community. So originally this was very much a beginners community, but it really has developed to support people, as they progress and become more advanced R developers, with book clubs and their Slack, which provides help and support on all different aspects of using R. And then if you're developing a package, I would point people to R OpenSci. So they have a forum, they have their package development guide, which is very user friendly. And then the R contributors community, which we've set up for people that are interested in contributing to base R.
That's excellent. Yeah, these links will be in the description. And it sounds like there are many resources to whatever level you are to get up to some knowledge to be able to contribute. And there's just definitely a need there. So thanks, whoever asked this question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any other communities or venues that Abhishek would recommend, but what did you find helpful?
So I had the experience of pushing 2 packages to CRAN, and I would say I've received a lot of email from a lot of maintainers, be it Victoria Wimmer or Kurt Hornick. I even got from Ripley, Professor Ripley. And I think what has happened is like they are very thorough with the process. They go through the code in depth. And in my case, they even found out bugs, which I had skipped over. That is, glanced it over, and they found those bugs and they notified me and told me to push an update to correct it. So what I believe is they are trying to maintain a very quality, that is the quality of the packages, and they want the newcomers. They are screening the newcomers to very heavily, so that they do not upload any uh, half baked or broken packages to the CRAN, and they are trying their best in that. And so their emails can feel a bit intimidating, because they want you to take action and complete the process and do it as fast as you can. So I think that is the intention behind being a bit rude, but I think overall I had a good experience with CRAN. So that is my side. And obviously having mentors will help you. If you are publishing a new package, reach out to someone who has already published a package to CRAN, so that you can get additional insights with them. In my case, like Heather had uploaded a package, so I got some knowledge from Christoph from our Fawcett studio, our studio from Fawcett, and even Diane Cook helped me. So when a lot of people give different opinions about their experience and their the problems they faced and how they solved it, I think that could be a good learning experience.
I really like you you shared that personal experience of trying to put something on CRAN, and the responses that you got, which hopefully sends a message that the efforts are quite united in keeping R a very high quality, and our packages very high quality piece of work that aims to be used by everyone. Thank you. Let's go to the next question. Do you know what the objective metrics are on diversity, like our conference attendance, package maintainers on CRAN, and leadership roles like the R Foundation?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a different answer to the different parts of the question. So if we take our conference attendance to begin with, well, I mean, there are a lot of R conferences, so I can only really talk about the Use R conference, which is the main conference that the R Foundation supports. So Forwards have run a survey of participants of the Use R conference since 2016. I think there might have been some surveys before then, but this is sort of the first sort of systematic survey, and we tried to keep it reasonably consistent between years, so that we could keep a track of these sort of metrics, the sort of demographics of participants. And a couple of years ago, I think, we had a Google Season of Docs project, which was partly working on a knowledge base for user, but another part of it was working on an info board, which presents these statistics alongside some of the data that we get from other sources, like registration and other information like the schedule and so on. So that is online, and there's been some work to bring it up to date just recently. But we're, again, it's a voluntary effort, so if anybody's interested in helping to run the survey, analyze the survey, keep the info board and things up to date, then we'd be very happy to hear from people that like to work on those things. Or if you don't want to volunteer your time, but you'd like to chip in a donation, you can do that via the R Project Open Collective. And if you go to the page, you can see the work that's been done, and where we have had funding and we've been able to pay people to do a bit of work in that area. So that's conference attendance. In terms of other aspects, when we first started Forwards, we did make a bit of a mistake, I would say, in that we tried to sort of generate some data, some metrics on demographics, just based on people's names, like the names of package maintainers. But then, we got some feedback on this, and we acknowledged that this has a lot of problems. It has a lot of biases. It further marginalizes people, particularly non-binary people, transgender people, people from different ethnic backgrounds, where you're making a lot of assumptions about people's names. And it focuses on limited aspects of diversity because you're mainly trying to guess gender, and if you try and go any further, it gets even worse. So we acknowledged this, and we sort of adopted a policy that we would only work with data that comes from the people themselves. So, as I say, either survey data or perhaps registration data if you have that information from some other sort of data collection. The downside, of course, is that this sort of data takes more effort to collect. So apart from the Use Our survey, Forwards and the R Foundation haven't run any other kind of surveys, but we have tried to keep an eye out for other surveys that people have done, particularly academic. So there have been some studies of CRAN maintainers. The last one we're...
Oh dear, Heather, can you unmute yourself?
Oh dear, how long is my...
Last time, something.
I don't know how that happened. I must have just nudged my keyboard or something.
No.
So I was just saying about surveys of package maintainers. So I think that's where I got up to. Just saying that we have kept an eye on surveys that academics have done, and last one we're aware of is from 2017. So that's a while ago now, and we have summarised the data from that study on our Forwards website. If anybody's aware of a more recent study, I'd be very happy to hear about that. And then the final part was about leadership roles. So then obviously you're then starting to look at very small groups, and then you have issues about disclosing personal identifiable information if you should try and sort of publish or collect data on demographics on such a small group. So that's not something we've done, but I think in cases where there are large imbalances, I think this is this is clear without sort of generating an overly precise statistic. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Abhishek, do you have anything to add?
So, if I may add something. So, I was looking at the metrics of, participation of people in USR from various countries over the years. And, I could see the difference that, people from, regions where the mobility is limited due to visa issues or, funding issues. So, if you consider those people, they will not be having, they won't be participating much in events, which are conducted in person in countries, in European countries or America, for instance. So in that case, you will see a lot of participation from American and European folks who are, who have it easy to, travel to these destinations and meet people. So that is why I think, if you consider the offline events as separate, and then when you look at virtual events, there is a lot more participation from these populations, who could not attend these events previously offline. Now they are attending it, and in good numbers as well. So I think these kinds of, differences can skew the data in metrics if you compare it. So I think that is why it is a bit hard, and it would require a bit of funding to get a really accurate representation in that regard.
Yeah,
So,
I would tend to agree too.
Well, I think it depends what your research question is, though. I mean, if we're it is something we should acknowledge, that if only certain people have access to things like USAR, and it was something where there was a big shift where we did have, the virtual conference. So it'll be interesting to see who participates this year, where we've got, an in-person component and a virtual component. I'm not sure it's, you know, as fully hybrid as we might have liked, you know, but it was an attempt, you know, to make it more inclusive than just having an in-person component. So, you know, I think it is interesting to see the contrast between the different formats.
Absolutely. Thank you. The person who wrote the previous question would like to follow up on, do we capture subjective metrics on like how inclusive people feel different parts of the art world are? Or perhaps you can share some conversations that you've had.
Yeah, so again, if well, my first thought about this was that, you know, it sort of requires a more involved study, you know, and if somebody did want to study that as, you know, as a sort of formal academic study, or, you know, if that could be funded in some other way, then I'm sure Forwards would be happy to collaborate on that. But I suppose thinking about it again, it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, because it is a subjective metric. I suppose it depends if you're not trying to say it necessarily represents the whole community in the way that a survey might. If you're just trying to collect some feedback, then I guess there are ways that could be done that perhaps that aren't, you know, that don't require such a big effort in terms of time and money. So I don't think that's really being done in any systematic way. You know, but perhaps that's something that could be considered.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. Abhishek, anything to add?
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add to this part, because feelings are subjective, as you know, like this, if you consider, you know, one feeling included or not is the same thing as if someone is living, you know, in a hot region, and if they are feeling cold because they have an AC at their home. So I mean, it depends on the situation that the person is in, and it really doesn't add up, in my opinion. So
Okay. Yeah, thank you for adding that. When would you recommend our open sci peer review versus the R journal and vice versa?
Are you familiar with the R open sci peer review, Abhishek?
I have not been, you know, a part of the, you know, writing. I think it is the, what you call them? I just forgot. So I think I'm not, you know, very much into academics and, you know, writing journal papers. So I'm not going to comment on any of these.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but I think I mean, in a sense, it's sort of slightly different, because our open site peer review isn't necessarily any link to a publication. So if you just go through the package review, it is just a code review of the package, and you're getting feedback on the package itself. So I think that can be really useful if you're developing a package, and you know, particularly if you're in a situation where you're not part of a team, or you don't have, as Abhishek was saying earlier, you know, mentors who have already developed a package that can give you advice. Then that could be a really useful process to go through. If you do want an academic publication, and you have gone through the R open sci peer review, then you can potentially be fast tracked for the Journal of Open Source Software, I think it is, JOSS. So you do have to meet certain criteria, which you need to check, but there is a sort of partnership or collaboration between the two, so that yeah, you sort of get fast tracked through the JOS process. And the JOS papers are very short descriptions of the software, a lot shorter than a typical academic paper. So it's the purpose is partly to promote it to potential users and provide a citable outcome if that would be useful. I mean, sometimes even if you're not an academic, you still like to get credit, so it can be useful to have a consistent way of citing the package, even when you keep updating the version and that sort of thing. Whereas, the R journal would be more the route to go if you want more academic credit for developing the software itself. The papers are a little bit longer, and here you're not necessarily just trying to promote the package to potential users, but also other package developers, other R programmers, to sort of say what's interesting about the way you've implemented it. Maybe there are approaches that could be applied more generally. Not so, and it does also publish papers that are not simply a presentation of a package, but a sort of review papers or benchmarking different approaches. So it's a more general venue in that sense. So I think those are the main differences between the two.
Great. Thank you. And last question from the community: what are the criteria to become a member of the R Foundation?
Right. So there's actually sort of two types of member of the R Foundation. That I presume this is talking about what are called ordinary members of the R Foundation, which are the members that are actively involved in the work of the foundation and have a vote in the General Assembly and so on. There's also another category which is simply a supporting member that pays membership fees just to support the R Foundation each year. So in terms of the ordinary membership, originally the R Foundation was made up of the members of R Core. That's how it began. And then they did expand that a bit to people outside of R Core. And members are added by a majority vote of the current members. So the people outside of R Core are people that have been nominated for making a substantial contribution, which is obviously fairly subjective criteria, but a substantial contribution to the R ecosystem. So we've got people like Arkin Sidice and Tilson Hawthorne, who founded the Use R conference. We've got people like Gabriela de Quiros, who founded Our Ladies. We've got several people who have been done a lot of service for the Use R conference and or the R Journal, which are two of the main activities of the R Foundation. So people tend to be nominated based on a sort of track record of contributions to the R community and their expertise in R itself. So I would say those are the criteria, and then obviously there's a vote of the members to add people. So that's the current structure.
Thank you. Abhishek, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to this, so that is from my side.
No worries. Well, that was the last question. This was a very eye-opening talk for me, being an R user and a bit naive to the complexity of the activities behind for diverse groups. What came to me was the Forwards Task Force, the lessons learned that you have shared, and the way forward that you have chosen. Also, the tools for making our products more accessible. I think I have so much to learn about that, to include that in my practice as I write R. And I wish you both all the best for the work that you're doing. I hope you get more funding for the work you're trying to do. I hope this Fire Chat sparks good conversations we can have offline and also at the conference. And I look forward very much to meeting you and to watch your presentations. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and see you very soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.